Hey, this is Bill Gladwell, and welcome to episode number 17 of the Hey Look at Me podcast. In this episode, I sit down with comedian Dan Mengini. Dan has appeared on Homeland, Necessary Roughness, Drop Dead Diva, One Tree Hill, Laughs on Fox, and has a starring role on Adult Swim's The Restless Belle. He has also appeared in over 50 national TV commercials, and he tours comedy clubs, colleges, and theaters across the country. Dan and I talk about my new Apple Watch, our worst gigs, humbling moments on stage, dealing with negative criticism, gauging the sensitivity of your audience, having a life outside of entertainment, making a first impression, leaving your emotional baggage off the stage, and never picking up the phone angry. If you haven't already subscribed to my podcast, you can subscribe on iTunes and Stitcher, and when you do, leave a 5-star review. I would really appreciate it. You can follow me on Twitter, @BillGladwell, and you can jump on my website with any questions or comments at BillGladwellLive.com. So enjoy episode 17 of the Hey Look at Me podcast.
You control the whole world from your watch.
I do. This is my Father's Day / birthday present. So I got an Apple Watch. It's nice.
Is your birthday near Father's Day?
Yeah, a week apart. Yeah, my birthday's June 12th, so it was...
Kids are going to be ripping you off for the rest of your life.
I know, right? So, you guys listen to podcasts?
No, but we will now.
No, you will now. Good. There's some good podcasts out there. You've been on podcasts before?
There are, yeah. I've listened to a couple. The Punchline, my home club, had Short Bus Heroes podcast with like a lot of listeners.
Short Bus Heroes.
Short Bus Heroes.
I haven't heard of that one.
They get a lot of guys, that were playing the Punchline Comedy Club to come in and do it after their sets. So a lot of big names on it. A lot of followers.
Oh, nice. Yeah, we're in I just put out the 14th episode. The podcast name is Hey Look at Me. And there's I don't know if it's a joke within the profession, I guess, but there might be something wrong with this because we have to stand on stage and have people watch us do our thing all alone. So
there might be some stuff to that, but I think the one thing that I think is like maybe like a little bit of a thing that I hear is that comedy has to come from like a dark place.
Yes.
The best comedy comes from a dark place. Yeah. And I don't think that's true at all. Yeah, that's not true at all. Like, I don't want to, because you kind of, become who you are. Well, who you are off stage is kind of who you become on stage. And I would hate to just be spouting out, negative things all the time and then, live with that, That's just not, my parents didn't raise me that way, so I want to stay away from that. But
you guys can move up if you want. You can stay there too, but you can move up if you want.
Yeah, really?
Yeah, I think there's another couple that was going to come back maybe, but it was the Possum Girl, so I don't know.
No way, the Possum Girl's coming back?
Yeah, that's what she said, but I don't know if they're coming back or not. But they're from Pinehurst. Maybe that's what they have in Pinehurst. I don't know.
Pinehurst, is it one of those places?
It's another golf community.
Yeah, it's a golf community, and I told them, I talked to them before the show because, and I didn't know anything about the Possum, but I talked to them before the show because they said they were from Pinehurst, and I said, a good friend of mine lives in Pinehurst, and he runs a bar there. And so I looked him up on my Facebook because I couldn't remember the name of the bar, and I told him, and they said, yeah, that's where we met. Those two met at the bar. I said, when you're in there next, he's a really good magician. So I said, don't let him tell you he's not. So Brandon, if you're listening to this, they're going to come in, but I told Holly was her name. I said, make sure that you ask him to show you a trick.
Now, your show is amazing. I guess you're classified as a mentalist, is that it?
Yeah, but I redid my writer last night because I needed to get it into an agent. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you know what a writer is, but it's the rules of how they can market you and how the room has to be set up and everything when I go on the road. And I said, you can't market me as a magician or a mentalist. It has to be marketed as thought reader because it's branding. I needed it. There's a lot of mentalists out there, so it's the same thing. But yeah, it's what I do. Yeah, I should say, if anybody's listening, we have Dan Mengini. Did I spell it? Did I not spell it? Did I pronounce it right? Mengini?
Yeah, Dan Mengini.
Mengini, yeah.
Right. Yeah. I throw out the dancomedy.com. That's why I went with dancomedy.com.
That's your website?
Yeah, because
dancomedy.com.
Dancomedy.com. Otherwise, there's just too much. It's just too hard to tell people. You're like, do what? Do what?
Well, when I got information on you, I hadn't heard your last name pronounced before, but a pronouncer came along with the bio.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
You mean just text or?
Yeah, text. Yeah,
okay.
But they actually had it phonetically spelled out. So your last name, not Dan. I got Dan, but the Mengini. So do people screw it up quite a bit?
Oh yeah. In fact, if my intro's perfect, it throws me off a little bit. I've heard everything from Mongoni to meningitis to mangina. I mean,
Mangina, you might want to consider
I'm
mangina.
I'm like, do your job, MC. Do your job. Do your job. I was blown away by your show because the first night I was in the back, and you were talking to a girl, and you're like, you have a pet? And she was like, yes. And you're like, it's a dog. She's like, yes. And I was like, man, this guy's good. And I was about to leave the room and go get it. And then you go, it's brown. She's like, yes. I was like, wait a minute. Hold on. It's a brown dog? I was like, that's unbelievable. You know? The guy, he gets the pet and the color. And I thought you were done. And you go, and her name's Jenny. And she was like, oh my God. And I was like, man, damn, son. I was like, I don't want this guy looking at my face ever again when he asks me a question. I was like, if you got any personal questions for me, man, can we do it via cell phone or something? But good job, buddy.
In my full show, that's a joke that I use not every night, but most nights. When I talk about psychics, that they can't read your mind or tell your future, or they can't talk to your dead relatives, I said, however, I do believe that the pet psychics are real, so I do that. So if you'd like to give me a call, you tell me the pet's name, what kind of pet it is. I will tell you what they like to eat, what they like to play with, how they're feeling at the moment. Most of the time, they like to give you they want you to send me $175. We can do it by credit card over the phone to make them happy. And so that's the joke I have during the show. But it's
I'm amazed that you walk through a grocery store and there's like 175 different types of dog food, right? And then you come home and your dog's eating turds in the garage. You know?
I wish my kids did that, kind of. Yeah, they would be cheaper.
What you've been doing? You've been performing for how many years? Roughly?
About 20, a little over 26 now.
Wow!
I was a hypnotist for 20 of those years. I still am a hypnotist, but
man, you're still good. You're still good.
So I do therapy, and I have my own therapy offices. Yeah, weight loss, stop smoking, depression, anxiety, things like that. And I did a stage comedy hypnosis show for the corporate market and fair and special events market. I did that all over the place.
So you're a licensed therapist for people with depression, anxiety?
Certified certified hypnotherapist. Yep.
Wow.
And I also teach it. I'm actually a trainer too, so I do that.
Wow, this is a great club. You can meet all the comedians' needs.
I have a chiropractor on the island that when Mike Armstrong was in town, and you and I had talked about Mike. So Mike, you listen to this, you'll hear this. I'll try not to give too much away. But Mike came in. I don't think Mike cares. He told everybody. But Mike came in and he opened the club with me. Do you guys know Mike Armstrong?
I do, personally.
Yeah. Do you listen to Bob and Tom, or do you know who Bob and Tom are? On the radio?
On the local station?
Yeah, they got one out of Savannah. Yeah. They're actually out of Indianapolis, Indiana, and they're syndicated all across the United States. And it used to be Clear Channel, but now it's iHeartRadio. Yeah. And Mike Armstrong he became a regular on there, but they actually launched his career. They built his career, and so he was down here. He helped me launch it on April 1st. But when he walked in, I had never met him before, but I've seen him on TV and heard him on Bob and Tom. He was like an 85-year-old man. He was. I didn't tell you the story, did I?
Was he crunched over?
He was crunched over, and he came in and he sat down. He introduced himself. He goes, man, the agent said I should just call this off, but I've never missed a gig. And he goes, I just said, nope. He goes, I said, what do you need? He goes, I need coffee, and can you put a chair on the stage? And I said, yeah. So I put a chair right here and lowered the mic, and he came up and sat here for all 4 nights and did the show sitting down. He was just here last week. I had him come back. And so I asked him after the first night, he got done, and I said, how did you pull your back out? And I was like, I was waiting to hear a story, I was lifting something heavy, or he goes, I was in the shower with this big, tall blonde, and I got in a position, and I just pulled my back out. That's what he said.
I'm crying on the inside.
So I got him a chiropractor here, and the chiropractor comes back, and he hasn't been back this week, but about twice a month he'll come back I let him in for free because now he's the official chiropractor for the comedy club.
Nice. Wow. Just so you know, Mike, there's a lot of things going through my mind right now, but we're gonna spare you the agony we're talking about.
And Mike, Dan's told me a lot about you too. I mean, more than I knew. So.
Well, I mean, we don't. We just know each other from, like I said. I mean,
working together.
Maybe 12 years ago, we did a string of one-nighters together. He was a headliner. I was his feature act. And then I think last year, maybe last June in Detroit, we both taped episodes of Laughs TV for Fox. And what can you say? I knocked it out of the park, and then another guy came after me and did well, and then Mike knocked it out of the park, and we went and had some barbecue.
How do you get on something like that? Like Laughs on Fox, or is it Fox on Laughs?
Laughs on Fox TV. Well, I've been doing stand-up for 16 years, and once you're around, it's such a fraternity that you start to know people, and people know your name and reputation, and you get a call. Hey, do you want to tape it? But the business is thousands of little breaks that lead to stuff like that, television and whatnot, and it's a heck of a journey. You just got to keep doing it, keep living it. I know that I've heard other podcasts where you talk about who your inspiration was, or why'd you get into it, and whatnot. The funny thing for me was, I think growing up, like everybody else, maybe watched a little bit of A&E. It was the Evening at the Improv. Rosie O'Donnell was a host, and things like that. But I didn't know I was going to be a stand-up. I mean, I went to high school, college, always kind of. I think what got me into it is I had an English grandfather that whenever he came to visit, it was just customary in my house to tell jokes at the dinner table. Yeah, in front of the kids. They could be just, we were exposed to all kinds of humor at a very early age. And then I would go to school and just repeat the jokes. And none of my friends would get them because we were 8, and it was adult subject matter. But I just knew, that's how I think I developed my timing through that. And then in 1998, just got out of college, I had a friend just say, hey man, everything you say is a joke. You need to get on stage in the next 5 months or you owe me $200. And I did. I ended up taking a comedy class because I knew nothing about it. And I think that class saved me about a year of mistakes, don't go over your time. You can't make a dirty joke clean, but you can always make a clean joke dirty. And I remember getting a call. I was an insurance agent at the time, a claims adjuster. And I got a call from the Punchline Comedy Club in Atlanta, just a legendary place, and the only place I had really played that was really comedy club. And the lady said, hey, are you Dan? I'm like, yeah. And she said, were you wearing a black shirt the other night? And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, my friends didn't pay their tab, That's what I'm thinking. And she says, hey, I like you. I want to book you. Are you available September, whatever? And I was available for the next 12 years. I didn't have anything booked, and she booked me with the Amazing Jonathan.
We just talked about
Labor Day
that
weekend. Mm-hmm. First
you guys know who the Amazing Jonathan is? He's a stand-up / magician, and he's in Vegas now. He's not performing right now, but he's in Vegas now, and
very successful.
You would probably know him if you've watched TV in the last 20 years. You probably have seen him somewhere.
Yeah.
Very successful man, very very talented, very funny guy.
We got to pause for a moment here because this is going to bug me for the rest of the podcast if I don't get this taken care of. But I glanced at Dan's watch and I'm trying to what time zone is he on? I thought he was from Georgia, and then and his watch says 10:27 p.m. Right now it's 9:57 p.m. And I said, that's not even a different time zone. That's like just a half hour later.
We don't all have iWatches that are synchronized to satellites. I mean, you probably know what the rotation of the Earth
30
is.
30 minutes right off, though.
Let me see your heartbeat, man. Hit a button.
Oh, I can do that. Yeah, I can hit the heartbeat. It's got to calculate it here, but it measures it all day long. This is really boring for you.
Look at it. It says you're going to be dead in 3 weeks. That's amazing.
I know. It predicts things better than I do.
Once you hit that like you're on television shows, you're on things that...
Oh, me?
You would think that at that point you... 104, that's a little fast.
I run fast. I burn my fat that way. Yeah.
I mean, you would think that you wouldn't do stand-up anymore at some point. Is that just your base?
No, I've been through. I've experimented with a lot of stuff and trying to figure out like what I like. In the beginning, it was stand-up, and then I'd fill the off days in with acting classes, and that led to like landing commercials. And I thought that was kind of fun because it's a different kind of like having to perform or pull through when there's like a lot of money on the line and cameras around and people's time, and you're like the talent. There's kind of a pressure there that. But then after going on these TV shows and whatnot and having some great experiences, I realized that stand up is just gets me out around people, and it's really what I like to do. It's not just being on stage that I like. I enjoy some of the solitude that comes with it, the traveling.
So Dan,
I like a lot of
early
aspects
in
of
your
it.
career, you started being a comedian. What happened when you had a really bad crowd? How did you adapt to that?
You know what? Start with this, Andrew. What was the worst gig you ever played?
And then how'd you come back?
You know what? I think when you say the worst, I think the most memorable show I ever had was, I knew this guy, I still do, he's a preacher that lives in northern Alabama, and he said, "Would you be willing to come up here and do a show for my friends and stuff?" And he knows everybody. He's a real likable guy. I go, "Yeah, man." I go, "Where are we doing it at?" And he said, "Here's the address." But I showed up. It was a gas station that was built probably in the 1800s, and the pumps were removed. 1800s, like I'm a history buff. I have no idea. It was old. You know what I mean?
It was prior to automobiles.
And when I get there, yeah. And the crowd is like, they're tailgating in the parking lot. No paved road. It's dirt. Trucks. They're tailgating like it's a football game. And I go in there, and it's a music store the gas station was converted to a music store. And I got to tell you, there were about 100 instruments on the wall, and there were 3 guitars, and the rest were banjos.
Wow.
Yeah.
Seriously?
Yeah. And so the preacher says to me, he goes, "Hey, if you don't mind, I'm going to go up and do like 5 minutes before you, because he loves stand-up." And I said, "Yeah, man, it'd be great, go on up." And great crowd, great people. And he went up and did about 75 seconds on stage. And he was sweating, having a great time. They loved him because he's such a likable guy. He's a preacher, and he gets off stage, and he looks at me and goes, "Man, that's the first time I've been on stage when I wasn't high." Please welcome Dan Mengini. Unbelievable. What, do you have any nightmare stories?
One. I mean, I've had, and there are bad audiences. There's not bad audiences, but sometimes you don't get the response that you want from the audience, and it's a challenge getting through the night. But it's not. It's just how it works. But I had one night. I got hired out early on. Now, when I do a gig, I push as much as I can to get paid up front when they sign the contract. And about 85% of the time I can get that. But this one gig early on when I was doing the stage comedy Hypnosis, I got hired out by an AmVets. And they said, "Yeah, come in." We're going to have about 250 people here. And you come in, we'll do a show. And I said, "Fine, that'll work." So I show up. And there's like 15 people in the whole place. And that included the server and the bartender. And I went up to...
How many people?
15. And I walked up and I said, "Listen, 250, are they coming later?" Because I show up about 2 hours early so I can get set up and everything. And he said, yeah, they'll show up. So it's getting 15 minutes to showtime and still 15 people in the room. And I didn't get paid up front. So I said, I'm going to have to do the show. Here's the thing with the Hypnosis show, though. It's a statistical formula. If I have 100 people in the room, I know 20% of them are going to volunteer, so I can get 20 people on stage. And out of those 20 people, I know 20% of those people, 20 to 25, are going to be really good, subjects. So I'm going to get 4 or 5 good ones up there, and I can do a show. So I like to have 100 people. There's 15. One woman volunteered when I asked for volunteers, and she was large. When I say large, she must have been 350 pounds. What they had for me on stage was folding chairs, metal folding chairs, and I had 20 lined up, so it looked odd because she was in the middle one. And I did the induction, and just by sheer luck, she was one of those people that just naturally went very deep into hypnosis. So over the first 3 minutes, she went out, and then all of a sudden, her chair buckled under her weight, right in the middle of the induction, and the legs spread out, and she hit, didn't open her eyes. And then because she was so drunk before she came up, she passed out and just laid back. And the audience, the other 14 people stood up and they applauded. And that was it. I mean, they thought it was part of the show, and I couldn't do it anymore. That was. I didn't get paid. So I didn't get anything that night. That was my worst show.
Oh man.
I've never had anything thrown at me or anything. Have you ever had anything thrown at you?
In a way, I had some guy tip over a candle when he got kicked out. He was in the front row and they kicked him out. And he tipped over a candle.
Did it catch anything on fire?
No. I just remember one of the worst shows I ever had. It was what we call a nooner. In a college.
I was gonna ask if it was at a college. In the cafeteria.
It was in a cafeteria / study area / pool tables in the back, and I walk in and there's no mic stand. It's a podium with the microphone coming out like the president would speak at. So number one, I have to do the whole show behind a podium, or drag it around if I want to talk to people. That was pretty hot. And when I walk in, there's a jukebox playing a Britney Spears, right? When she really just was hitting, it was blazing. And I said, okay, cool, man, just I'll try and figure this out. People are doing their homework, and there's about 15, 20 people in a room that could seat like 900. One of those. And I look at the guy and said, hey, man, that's cool. Just turn the jukebox off and then do my intro, and I'll come up there. And I only had to do 30 minutes. And he said, well, we usually just kind of let the jukebox keep playing. And it was such a nightmare that I got up there and I go, hey, I got some jokes for you. And some guy, Middle Eastern, goes, I don't like jokes. And I thought he was just joking, with me. And he was serious. And eventually they got campus security to come and walk me to my car after the show to make sure that this guy didn't attack me.
Yes, good job, Tasia. Tasia, you made the podcast. I'm not really sure what happened, but Tasia's server here, and she dropped fire or the candle on the floor. So,
do you there's a worse show experience, and then has there ever been a time where you were just completely humbled by a situation, or there's those moments where you feel like you're going backwards sometimes in life or in your career.
I used to let that kind of stuff bother me because, so I did the stage comedy Hypnosis. I cheated. Actually, I'm supposed to be interviewing him, but he's asking good questions. So I did the stage comedy Hypnosis for 20 years, and I wanted to do something different. And the joke I make with friends is that I wanted to grow up, I guess, and not do the stage. But the Hypnosis is completely different than what I do now because it's more improv. Basically, you get 20 people on stage, you end up with about 5 or 6 of them, and then you have skits that you want to do, and you make these people part of the skits, and you give them different roles, and it's improv. I have to make it up as we go along. And so it's a fun time. But it's really stressful for the first 10 minutes while you're doing your introduction, and then you have to get volunteers, and then the volunteers have to cooperate, and then some of those people have to go out. So it's so much better after the first 10 minutes as soon as you know that a few people have gone out, so you're going to have a show. And so it's a little stressful there. And I never really had a problem with getting anybody out at all, and I actually teach it now, but it's still stressful. So I wanted to do this. So we moved from Columbus, Ohio, and I was doing a lot of corporate work, and I moved to Gatlinburg, Tennessee, because from Ohio, it was the closest place. It was either Atlantic City, Gatlinburg, Branson, or Vegas. And so we took about 4 months to find a theater, and I met with the owners, and they liked me, and they said, can you do a show for us, or at least show us some of your material next week when we come back into town? And Eric Diddleman, I don't know if you guys watch America's Got Talent. Do you guys watch that? Eric Diddleman, about 3 years ago, it was The Mentalist on there, and he does colleges too. And they had seen him on America's Got Talent 3 or 4 years ago. He was on, and they knew what mentalism was, but they had never seen it in person. So I go home. I was really excited and told my wife, listen, they want me to come back and do some material. She goes, oh, what are you going to do? And I said, I don't know. I had no material. I billed myself as a mentalist, but I didn't actually perform in it yet. But I was comfortable on stage. I said, I got a week. I can put something together. So I put 20 to 25 minutes together. And when I put it together, I went back and did it, and they loved it. Said, good, can you start next week? And I said, yeah, I can start next week. So I had to put because I had 20 minutes, I had to put another 60 minutes together in a week.
That's
and I did it. And I thought it sucked. I thought it was bad. But nobody, luckily coming to Gatlinburg, had anything to compare it to. So I started getting really good TripAdvisor reviews and stuff. And so that's how I got started. And then Gatlinburg was a good place to practice. And we had to move because my son has really bad allergies, and the doctor kind of ordered us to get out of Gatlinburg. It was one of the worst places in the U.S. So we said, well, a beach, because he said that would be better. So we came here. And but it was really humbling. You ask about getting back to your question, because I started getting TripAdvisor reviews, and for 20 years I had never got reviews. I got good comments from people at corporations and colleges and stuff like this.
Yeah,
that
the
they would hire me
internet's
up.
a brutal thing.
Yeah,
There's
then
some
I-
kid in the basement, you never know.
So I got TripAdvisor, and man, and I had 711 TripAdvisor reviews when I left. 98% of them were 5-star reviews. But that's that handful out of there that were just like 1 and 2 stars, which didn't even make sense. But I would dwell over them for weeks, because one guy wrote a 1-star review, and he said, I know how you did everything. And he proceeded to go throughout his review and just say how I did it. And he had the same explanation for everything I did for my 75-minute show, and that he was there with his wife and kid.
He's a wizard.
Yes, that's right, a wizard.
He's a wizard.
We had 90 seats in the room in the theater at the time, and which is about what we have in here. We had 90 seats, and he said the audience was all in on it.
That's awesome.
And I couldn't even respond to that on TripAdvisor other than, you're right. I hire out, I hire out 87
Wow.
people to come in and fool just one family every night. That's
They
exactly
all
what I do.
travel with me.
Yes. But every time, back to the humbling part, every time I would read, and if I hear somebody say something, which it doesn't happen here, but it does. Penn Jillette from Penn & Teller out in Vegas, he'll say 2,000 people can walk by him, and then that one person from the night goes, I hated the show, and just keeps walking, and that bothers him for a week. And so I don't know if it ever gets old, but it bothers me.
Yeah, that internet stuff's brutal.
What about for you?
It could be a kid in the base. Like the one thing I was so happy to land a part on a small part on a show called Dead Diva, because I was like, all right, man, cool TV show, and like my scene was gonna be with Rosie O'Donnell, right? And it's kind of cool to show up, and the other actor in the scene is a stand-up. And before you shoot a TV show, they like to have all the cast and then the day players all come around and sit around a table and do a table read and go through the whole script. And what you do before the table read is everyone goes around and introduces who they are and what role they're playing, and you go around clockwise. And this whole thing's being, they're feeding it out to like LA too, where the suits are watching because they want to see if the episode flows the way they wrote it or something like that. So unfortunately, I was the first guy with one of the smaller parts sitting to the left of the guest stars and the cast members. So to give you an idea, April Bowlby, who's done a ton of stuff, but then it went to Margaret Cho, and then it was Delta Burke, and then it was Liza Minnelli, and then it was me, and then it was like, so when I had the script, at first, they were casting for a 30-year-old guy. That was the name of the role I landed. 30-year-old guy. Later on, I got my name was Mark in the episode, but for the table read, I'm 30-year-old guy. And I'm the only guy that's coming in and shooting for like one day, maybe two, but one day. Everyone else is, it was like playing an episode. It was like being on an episode of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, but you're the only eligible contestant type thing, right? So, it goes around the room, and hi, I'm Margaret Cho. I play blah, 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 da-da-da-da-da. I know me from this and that and that. Hi, I'm Delta Burke. You might know me from Designing Women, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Hi, I'm Liza Minnelli. And everyone's like, oh, yeah, and she talks about the part she's playing. I'm playing a psychic, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And then it gets to me. and I go, hey, my name's Dan, 30-year-old guy. And
that was it.
Everyone laughed. Everyone laughed, and the director goes, that's why I hired him. And man, I went from feeling like a big shot walking into this room to just going, man, I've got a long way to go. But that was a humbling, embarrassing, moment. And luckily afterwards, Margaret Cho came up and said, hey, I know you, right? Because we had worked together at a club in Atlanta that she used to stop in due time at. But that was a very embarrassing, humbling moment. Yeah, but the internet things happen too to anyone. I mean, these days with like Yelp and Facebook and all that. I was on a web series called FARK, F-A-R-K.
I heard of that.
TV.
Yep.
We did 179 or 189 episodes, and we were each episode's about 3 minutes long, and we were putting out content for TBS. Had a site called Super Deluxe. They were just getting into like the web thing and all this, and it was really, really, really good money for like 2 years. But we were linked up to a website that my friend owns called fark.com, F-A-R-K, fark.com. And they're notorious for just ripping people to shreds and doing it like in a clever way. And they would like take our episodes, some of them, and put them on that website. And man, people would just go berserk. They either loved you or hated you. There was no in between. And I was sort of like used to like traveling and getting up in front of strangers and being judged. But all my co-stars, the people I worked with, they had a really, really hard time with it. And I was able to let it go. But sometimes you'd knock it out of the park with like 120 comments, and then you get to that one that's like, I wish that white guy would die.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, okay. You can't please them all, man.
There's a comedian, and I can't remember his last name, but you may know him. He was on America's Got Talent up until this week. But Mike, and I can't remember his last name, but it's spelled with a Q.
Kaplan.
Mike Kaplan.
I don't know him, but I do know of him. Yeah.
Yeah, and he had, and this is the philosophy I've always lived by too, but it's still hard to live by it. But yesterday he didn't have such a great set on America's Got Talent.
That's a tough show for comedians,
it is,
man.
Because you can't get a relationship with the crowd that quick and stuff.
And
you got 90
have
seconds.
Judges sitting there talking.
Yeah. So Howie Mandel loved him, and then you had Mel B, and then you had who's the model?
Heidi.
Heidi, I hate her. So Heidi, and then you have Howard Stern, and Howard said it wasn't your best set. It wasn't your best set, and but all the rest of them said no, we thought it was pretty good. And Howard was giving him constructive criticism, but he said, listen, you can't. They asked him, Nick Cannon said, what do you feel about the comments of the judges? Because you can't please everybody at the same time. If you're pleasing everybody, you're not doing something right. And that's what I kind of live by, but it's really still hard to hear those negative reviews, even though you live by that. And I think that was actually, and I always accredit it, I stopped using his name, but I think Bill Cosby actually said that early on, is if you're making everybody happy, you're not doing something right. And but I'm not quite sure what he was referring to now at this point.
Well, it sounds like comedy has got to be one of the hardest. To me, it sounds like comedy's got to be one of the hardest careers in professions. In that, you're in front. You put yourself out there where.
I'm gonna let you take this one only because I don't care if anybody laughs or not, because I'm not a stand-up. I always bill myself as a thought reader, and I like. See, my show is very serious in Gatlinburg, and then I got down here, and it was because I was restricted on what I could do. We didn't want to make anybody mad, and it was it's the belt buckle of the Bible Belt, so I needed to make sure it was very, very clean. Down here, I can be a little bit more loose, and my influences have always been stand-ups. I love going to comedy clubs, and I go all over the place to watch, and so I wanted to build some of that feel into it. So I'm going to let you take that one of the.
Well, no, I think I know what you mean. You're saying it's the hardest thing to do.
These days, it's easy to offend.
Oh, that's fun. Did you read that article that
the whole politically correct
Seinfeld
thing?
wrote?
Yeah, I've noticed that probably more with the college shows starting about 2 years ago. They can be like very sensitive, but you can also place things in certain points. If you're doing an hour of comedy, once the crowd gets to know you and you're feeling them out a little bit, then you can sort of play with the second half hour of your set. At least that's the way I do it. With some of the more like, if there's something touchy in there or edgy or whatever, but you're like, yeah, one word you can kind of like, you can lose some people. But if you're a good communicator, you can kind of stop what's going on and recognize that and feel a way to bring the crowd back to you, And as far as comedy being the toughest thing, well, not for me. Like, it's if there's something I've heard this said about acting, and I think it can apply to comedy too. If there's something else, anything else that you think you should be doing, go do that. And stand up has been the answer for me since 99. And if it isn't one day, then it won't be. But until then, I don't worry about how tough it is. I mean, it is what it is, and all you can really do. Your only job really is, or my only job, I feel like, is to continue to get to know myself, my likes and my dislikes, and figure out what I want to talk about and the way I see things, and sort of stay in my lane, and be truthful 100% of the time, and then it makes your comedy undeniable and easier to find your audience.
It's interesting that you said that, and because I took a real job for about 6 years as a pharmaceutical rep for Johnson & Johnson, and I ended up being a sales trainer for him too.
Wow.
But I was still doing my shows along with that. And I got about 3 years into it, and I wanted to get out because my heart was being on stage more than what I was doing, and it was hard to do when I was traveling or, doing the real job. But at that point, you get a pharmaceutical sales rep, you get a 6-figure income and a car and health insurance and stocks and all this stuff. Expense account, we had an $8,000 expense account we had to spend every month. It was hard to get out. It was like the golden handcuffs. And so finally, after 6 years, I just said, I can't, even with all this, I can't. So I gave the car back and everything and went back into full-time entertaining. So it was, because that's
and I see, and I listen to stories like that, and I hear them. I hear that, So I kind of think, you're very fortunate if you become like, the Jerry Seinfelds or the Brian Regans, these guys that command such a high dollar amount, the Ron Whites and
Louis C.K.
Yeah, you're very fortunate and you know what? Those guys, none of them are stupid. They know there's a luck factor that came into it. They're not dumb, but they're also very talented. And I guess they're getting a little off topic here, but I think with the money, it's always great to have enough. The excess, right? There's nothing really in that for me. The excess.
Yeah.
When I was doing the webisodes for Super Deluxe, they were I guess that we're not longer in the contract, but they were giving us $7,000 a webisode because we would drive so much traffic to the site, for ads and whatnot, and that's good money when you're single, That's good money to split up when you can crank out 4 a week and work your tail off. But not being on the road, during that time, I was only able to go out and do a college gig on the weekend or maybe a club here and there. And I wasn't able to get out on the road and do stand-up as much because I spent all my time writing for the show and, acting in it. And I wasn't as happy then as I am when I'm traveling and meeting people and doing things like this. So, yeah, just having enough is a beautiful thing.
Yeah, before we moved down here, when I say we, I got a wife and kids, we decided, we were looking, Vegas, actually Teller from Penn & Teller told me, he goes, no. He goes, when we moved here, they would pay us to move here. They put us up in the penthouses, and they put us up in the room, then they grew up to the penthouses. Now they have their own homes. But he said, if you can go any place else, don't come to Vegas. But we were looking at Vegas. We were looking at L.A. We were looking at Arizona because it was close to L.A. And we were, and the reason is because I got friends that are doing TV now. And they're just because they're out there and they're no better than I am, but they're in the right spot. But then we had to make a decision. Do we want our kids to grow up in Las Vegas? And so that's why we're still here. But I hear a lot of comics that come through here that say it's absolutely a must that you either go to New York or LA if you want to get on TV or if you want to advance your career. Now, you're not in either one. Dan. So, what do you put any stock in that, or what do you think about?
Well,
that?
I mean, no. Well, I'm based. If something takes you, there's plenty of ways to do it. But I think you have to have a life outside of what you do. And L.A., if you're happy there, great, stay there. And if you're in New York and you're happy there, stay there. There's friends of mine in Atlanta who've gotten pulled out to Los Angeles for Last Comic Standing. And, there's an old saying, if you don't have any business in LA, then you've got no business in LA. So I kind of come from that.
You don't think it's a must that you just pack up and move to one of the two to make it?
No. You can work your way. I think eventually you'll end up there if we're talking about. I mean, define making it. Define making it. There's guys that you have never heard of that are bringing in great money, doing what they really enjoy doing that aren't in New York or LA.
But the competition is so tough there.
That's true too. But I mean, let's take there's a guy named he's been around for a long time. The funniest man in America, James Gregory. He lives in Atlanta, Georgia. He has a following that's in the millions. He's been doing stand-up for 30 plus years. And I have a good idea of, what kind of money he brings in. And he's making a lot more money than tons of people in New York or in LA, with the exception of the big stars. So it's kind of a numbers game too. I know people that have moved to New York and they've stayed a couple years and then they're back in Atlanta. They tried LA. It just kind of didn't, work for them, and they're back in Atlanta. And they're very talented people. And then I know people that kind of took a bunch of shortcuts and haven't paid many dues and get a break, but then it kind of really shows, and there's a good chance that you're not going to have the longevity. So to each his own, man. To each his own.
Is there anything that really gets under your skin that from the profession, from other comics, or in general?
Performance-wise, or just
being in the business?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you can be put in a situation where, the person that's supposed to watch your show and write a review to get back to the big boss or whatever, says to himself, like, man, I think my girlfriend likes that guy. I don't really want to see him back again, so I'm gonna write something in here. Like, you can be put in a situation where someone has too much power over you. So there's a lot of stuff. But you know what? There's politics in everything. So I don't get caught up in that. I just try to be myself and have fun, man. There's more important things going on in life.
So if somebody's just starting or is new to the business, what is the main thing that they can do to get them to where they want to be as a professional comic? Is it open mics as much as possible, or what is it?
Well, that's true. I mean, open mics, you got to do that, but you've got to go to comedy clubs and just watch these professionals. A lot of people think, comedy is just the 5 minutes that they see on TV that these headliners do. And you go into a club and you're like, oh my gosh, this guy's funny for 45 minutes or an hour, and then you start to go, and you got to watch people that aren't that good at it at the beginning, because then you can kind of see the tricks behind it, or you can kind of like see different levels. But you got to go to the clubs, you got to go to the open mics, and you've got to have friends that you meet up with. It's a great idea to just have a day out of the week that you try and write a couple of jokes, or you get some fresh ears on some jokes, and everything snowballs from there. Like maybe an owner gives you a club owner gives you a spot to MC one of the nights. Do a good job. You work with another comedian from another town, and they say, "Hey, I know so and so," and blah blah blah. It's a small world, man. I was helped tremendously by a waitress at the Punchline whose husband was a headlining comedian, and she saw me and called him, and then he called me. I didn't know who the guy was, and he ended up taking me on the road for like 12 weeks a year. So that was a lot of work just from getting out of the house and getting on stage. That first year I was on the first time I decided to go on the road, I I had about 20 minutes of material, maybe 23 minutes if I did like a waitstaff announcement. Yeah, and you really can't do it until you do it, type thing. The first time you have to do 30 minutes, you do it. But those are little things, man. I think the main thing is just get around, get into the clubs, get some people's names, start hanging out with people, and immerse yourself in the culture. Don't worry about the show business part of it first. Develop some skills. Learn how to make people laugh for 15, 20 minutes. Then, things will happen for you if they're supposed to. You don't want to go too. You don't want to get. If you're great at marketing and all that stuff, there's a chance that you're gonna overshoot yourself and get like a gig that you're not ready for. I think it's better to be a year late in this business than it is to be a day early.
Makes sense.
You never get that. You never get that second chance to make that first impression. And in perception is reality. That's what they say, and it is.
Makes sense.
And don't cuss in Hilton Head. Don't cuss in Hilton Head.
It's not too bad.
No.
It's not too bad.
No, PG-13 is kind of my wheelhouse. So I kind of have to. I find myself like in these clubs having to really like edge it up a little bit on the Friday late shows and whatnot. But I wish all the rooms were like this. Be more work for me, man. Be more work for me.
Is it difficult? You're single, right, Dan?
I'm single right now.
Okay,
Yeah.
So you can travel and make your choices and all that.
I know what you mean, but I mean, like you gotta take time to get to know somebody, and there's somebody for everybody. I think I'm a. That's the funny thing about this business, man. When you're going through a breakup, and they're like, "Please welcome to the stage, your headliner, Dan Mengini." You gotta that's when you're a pro, when you can put all that stuff aside and like entertain. That's something to talk about. Just being in like a severe depression after a breakup, and then just pulling up to a gig, and you're like, I'm so lonely.
I've never missed a gig, except for my first gig I ever missed was 2 nights ago. And and the reason I've had the flu. And I don't have an intermission during my 75-minute show, but I've had the flu where I've come on stage and started the hypnosis. And right in the middle of the show, I give them a post-hypnotic suggestion. So when I say sleep or something, you go back out. I say, all right, we're going to take a 15-minute break. And I'd run to the bathroom and come back up and do the rest of the show.
Wow.
Never missed a gig. I don't have something was going on in the family or anything like that for 26 years now. I had a gig Wednesday night up in Indianapolis, Indiana. So I flew up there. And I was going to be back around 3:30, 4 o'clock in the afternoon on, Thursday afternoon to make the show. I had a 7 o'clock show, and then I had to be on stage to MC the 9 o'clock show. And I get a call at 8 in the morning saying my flight was delayed by 3 hours and also pushed every other flight back. And I didn't get back until the show was beginning at 9 o'clock. So I had to cancel my 7 o'clock because I didn't land until 7:33 over in Savannah. And so I was on the phone in line at the airport while I was waiting to reschedule my tickets, calling people in the show to move them to Friday night at 6. So I did that, and then I showed up about 8:50 for the 9 o'clock show and came up on stage, and everything was done. I mean, it was nothing mattered but the stage at that point. And so you do have to leave all of that, regardless of what's going on in your life. You have to leave. So that was the first show I ever missed, and it was unavoidable. I just couldn't. It was impossible. And it wasn't because of me. It was because of the airline. So, but what about you? I mean, you do have to leave everything right at the door when you come into a club, because you have to be you on stage.
Yeah, I think once you get on stage, I mean, you forget it. You've got to be so in the moment. You've got people staring at you, and it's amazing what you can do when lights are in your face. You have to be in the moment, and everything goes away.
I'm sure we're not the only profession, I'm sure, because I'm sure a brain surgeon, if he has a hard day with his wife and he has a surgery later in the afternoon, that he needs to be at the top of his game. And so I'm sure they have their issues too, but it's true here also.
Yeah.
Plumbers, that's probably a tough one. You're going through a breakup and you gotta fix a sink. That's gotta be the stress. The stress of
Even the brain surgeon, the patient is out.
That's true. You can
You guys
talk
are
smack
talking
to
a lot.
him.
That's right, yeah.
Hairdresser, that's got to be a tough one.
You don't want to go up to an upset hairdresser. That's not any good at all. So you've been doing this for how long now, Dan?
I want to say I started open micing in 99, so 2001 I was full-time. 2001.
Awesome, for quite a while.
So 15 years. Did you guys enjoy the show tonight?
Oh yeah.
It was excellent how you worked the investigator into the show.
Working everyone into the show.
Yeah.
And
Right.
the girl with the possum was pretty darn funny.
Yeah, the girl with the possum. This is kind of a unique room in that it's almost like working, a little bit like working a cruise ship. And what I mean by that is it's a vacation destination, and I don't know what your experience is with stuff like that, but in this room, more so than like most comedy clubs, they really enjoy the crowd interaction stuff. They really enjoy it. Whereas, if you're at, the Improv in Atlanta or whatever, or, Zanies in Nashville, the crowd is really trained to come in and just, watch you do your show. And it's almost like you're filming an HBO special in which there's just absolutely zero crowd work. But here, it's just, I don't know if it's because of intimate setting or just a combination of people are on vacation, so they're coming in with a different mentality.
Many times. This is the first time they've been to a comedy club.
I can believe that. I can believe that. In the age of the some people, it's the last time they're ever going to be in a comedy. And with that,
So Dan, I like to end. We'll wrap it up, but I like to end the podcast with a tip on the business side of things, not actually on stage. And for example, my tip is always if I have somebody new getting into the business and they say, "What's one thing you can tell me?" And it's to be bold. And what I mean by that is that you take chances not on stage. I mean, you can on stage, but when in the real world you call people that nobody else is calling and you do things nobody else is doing, and that's what's going to help most in my eyes. But what is it for you?
if you treat it like a business, you'll always be in business.
What do you mean by that?
And don't ever pick up the phone angry. I'm honest, I'm serious about that. You know, when you say don't ever pick up the phone angry, you're like, what is, you talking about relationships? Well, you know what? You're in a relationship business. You know, it's a small community, and it's very tough sometimes to be selling a product and you're the product. You know, so it's very easy to bring emotions into business, and those two things, you know, they really shouldn't collide. It's going to happen at some point in your career, and you're going to learn from it. There's a very...
You make it sound like we're prostitutes.
we're not. There's an agent, a very good agent. I read a quote from him. His name's Danny Robinson. He was with APA at the time, and he said, no matter what level you're at in this business, don't get angry, just get better, because there's always going to be someone. I kind of got that backwards. He said, don't ever get angry, because no matter, you know, what level you're in this business, someone's going to make you angry. So it's his philosophy was, don't get angry, just get better.
I learned a lesson early on of how I didn't want to be, and it was because of Tiger Woods. So I'm working out in a hotel where Tiger was staying for this tournament he was in up in Ohio. And I asked him, because he came in to work out too, could I have your autograph? And I had him sign a hat. And he said, yeah, not a problem. And he goes, I'll sign it for you. And he did. And that's about the full conversation. I said, my son, could you sign this other hat for my son? He goes, I told you I'd give you one signature. That's what he said. And that moment is the moment I said, I never want to be like that. So if somebody wants to stick around and talk after my show for an hour, I stick around and talk with them until they're done talking to me, because I don't want anybody having that lifelong memory of me being that person that did that to him. How do you feel about that?
I think if you were a woman, he would have signed a bunch of autographs for you.
And a waitress. Dan, if people want to get a hold of you, Well, we talked about it at the beginning of the podcast, but tell them again, how do they get a hold of you?
DanComedy.com.
Dan Comedy. What are they going to find when they get there?
Amazing. It's actually a really good website. And you can that links up to the Twitter and the Facebook, and you can contact me. You can contact agents. You can just sit there in your basement and scroll through photos and videos. I don't know what you want to do. I don't know what you do. I don't know what you do with your life.
It's Dan, D-A-N, not damn comedy. It's DanComedy.com.
That's right.
Yes.
That's right.
Yes. And it's funny because I had a friend. Who was that? It might have been my dad. Anyways, when Hotmail was big, there's a really big difference between Hotmail.com, Hotmail, and HotmailMale.com. So when I told this person, I can't remember if it was my dad or a friend, to go and get a Hotmail account, he didn't know what I was sending him to. So
a week later, a guy named Steve moved in. Thanksgiving dinner's got a lot better. All right.
All right. Well, guys, thanks for sticking around, and it was a really good time. Dan, thanks for doing the podcast.
Oh, it was a pleasure, man. Thanks for having me this week.
No problem.
Great.
Thank you. It was good.